Hello, everyone. This is Shaya Mohsenin, a PhD candidate in marketing at Bocconi University. Today, I would like to present my joint project with Kurt Mons titled Gender-Ambiguous Voices and Social Disfluency. This project has just been accepted for publication in Psychological Science. Actually, in this project, we try to introduce a new type of disfluency calling social disfluency, meaning difficulty understanding gender of a speaker rather than difficulty understanding the information itself. So we try to show this effect in a digital voice assistant context. As you can see on this screen, these are the most common digital voice assistant in the market: Amazon Alexa, Apple Siri, and Google Assistant. One thing that is common amongst all of them is that they were introduced for a female-sounding voice, which reinforce such harmful stereotype that a female might be an assistant. In response to that, voice assistant try to make available other voices. For example, Google introduced the first male-sounding digital voice assistant, but there are other calls for other solutions as well. A group of sound engineers in Denmark created the first genderless digital voice in 2019, called it Q, sounded neither as a male nor female. It sounds something like this.
Hi, I'm Q, the world's first genderless voice assistant. Think of me like Siri or Alexa, but neither male nor female.
Following them, Apple responded to that call and made available its first gender-neutral Siri voice assistant in 2022. So this question came to my mind: that how consumer responds when it's difficult to understand the gender of the speaker, while the goals of this are laudable. So they wanted to introduce a voice that doesn't have these harmful stereotypes. It's unclear how consumer responds to this. So I was concerned because there is a reason to believe that consumer might respond negatively. So when I asked myself this question, it sounded up to me a lot like disfluency. According to cross-influency disfluency literature, disfluency has been defined as subjective experience of difficulty with which people process information. So it has been shown that when the information presented in hard to read font, as you can see on this screen, compared to easy to read font, people evaluate less favorably the information in the disfluent condition. It has been also extended to other areas, including the auditory realm. So, for example, the sound quality of a presentation, for whatever reason, isn't great. People are going to rate that information less. In another study work on accent, people with foreign accent were evaluated less compared to someone without an accent. The authors in this case suggested that it's actually harder to understand what they're saying, and people misinterpret this difficulty in understanding what they're saying with their evaluation of the information itself. So I was wondering whether the similar process could be applied to difficulty processing social information when the information itself is easier, it's equally easy to be understood. So I predict that it could be, and I provided two reasons for that. The first could be related to categorization. So difficulty categorizing as a male or female could be misinterpreted as this feeling of difficulty that as that people might dislike the speaker or the information. Another reason could be related to the link of familiarity fluency, meaning that hearing information in gender obvious voices would be easier to be evaluated, or might be interpreted as a sense of fluency. So, since people encounter more often with gender obvious voices in their day-to-day life, and on the other side, people less familiar with such gender ambiguous voices, it would be the case that familiarity or less familiarity with such voices could drive the effects. And also it's possible that people have prejudice. So since non-binary voices are more commonly associated with LGBTQ people, and if people hold prejudice against LGBTQ people, it might be that they are just expressing this bias rather than showing a type of social disfluency like the one that I'm arguing here. So far, to show this effect of social disfluency, I ran five previous studies, but today, for the sake of time, I'm going to present three of these studies. In the first study, I'm going to share the result using an actual digital voice assistant. So, as you know, Apple introduced its first genderless digital voice assistant a year ago, and also it has both male and female Siri, which are available. So the point of this study was to compare how consumers react to a description of consumer products when they're described by either the male Siri, female Siri, or the ambiguous Siri. So I designed this two-way mix experiment where participants heard a description of two similar brands of toothpaste, one described by clearly uh, gender voice and the other described by the gender ambiguous voice of Siri. I did also counterbalance the order of both narrator and toothpaste brands. As our DV, instead of asking about their liking of the speaker or the information itself, we try to show the spillover effect of social disfluency on product evaluation. Then we ask participants to rate how much they like this product. Also, we checked for two possible explanations: social disfluency and processing disfluency. So we asked participants how difficult was it to evaluate the gender of each speaker, to measure social disfluency, and to measure disfluency, we asked participants how difficult was it to evaluate the information provided by each speaker. As you can see on this screen, the result was consistent with our hypothesis, meaning that when the products were described by gender ambiguous speakers, they were like less than when they were described by clearly gender speakers. And this happened when both contrasting the male voice to the ambiguous voice, the two bars on the left, and when contrasting the female voice to the ambiguous voice, two bars on the right. As you can see, the results are significant. Consistent with our theorizing, this is also mediating for social disfluency. As remember, we asked participants to rate how difficult was it to evaluate the gender of each speaker to measure social disfluency, and found that when the descriptions were presented or were described with gender ambiguous voice, people experience harder time to evaluate the gender of the speakers, which in turn lead to reduced product evaluation. But surprisingly, processing fluency was also significant, which could be due to different differences between the actual voices we use here in this study. Meaning that each voice has its own voice characteristic. For example, like polylinguistic cues like intonation, position, etc. So to deal with that, in the next studies, we try totally different stimuli, and we try to manipulate the gender of the voice by just changing one piece of the voice characteristic, the pitch of the voice only, by raising up and down its fundamental frequency. And in study two, we tried to show this effect using just one voice as a base, and we found that just social disfluency mediates the effect, not a processing fluency or difficulty on evaluating the information. Following the same logic, so in study four, we were looking for a moderating role of categorization. So as I said, there could be the two different accounts, social categories and familiarity. Uh, to explain this social disfluency. So in this study, we tested whether the effect is driven by categorization account or not. To do so, we randomly assigned participants to four conditions, where we use a Google Mail voice as a base voice. So we cross this manipulation of pitch with manipulation where we either gave the voice names or not. So the idea behind this study was, if participants encounter a voice that has clearly gender name, they should be less uncertain about what gender category it belongs in, and that should kill the effect. Consistent with our prediction for social disfluency, we replicate our effect in the under the non condition. Those bars on the right, on the left, as you can see that the gray bar in the ambiguous condition. Uh, was relatively worse than the male version of the voice. And the result was inconsistent with the idea of categorization, as there was also a significant difference when the voice were named, because it was the case that people would rate closely in both name conditions, two bars on the right. In this study, we also try to measure explicit prejudice by using existing scales in the literature. And we found that when controlling for explicit prejudices in this kind of explicit way, the result were exactly the same. So we ran another final study trying to look at familiarity fluency account. We use another digital voice called Sophie as a base voice, and we change its pitch to create either an ambiguous or clearly female version of it. So we cross the manipulation of the product narrator with manipulation of the study's instruction. So in the previous experiment, the instruction were given in a text format, but here we allowed people to listen the instruction either in a female version of Sophie or ambiguous version of Sophie in order to expose more often people to one of these two voices. The idea here was that uh, being more exposed to such voices and make them more familiar, so the effect should be diminished in terms of the size of social disfluency effect. Consistent with our hypotheses, we found that familiarity is an important moderator. So when participants had more exposure to the ambiguous voice, those bars on the right on the left, there was no difference between the product rated in the ambiguous voice and the product rated in the female voice. However, we replicated our effect when the female voice narrated an introduction. They preferred the product that was described in a female voice more. Again, to address prejudice, we look at LGBTQ perception by asking, to what extent do you think the voice of each speaker sound like a person from the LGBTQ community, in order to also replicate our previous finding in study 4. And what we found was that both groups perceived the ambiguous voice to be LGBTQ. So as you can see, there is significant difference between the two voices on both conditions. So it implies that voice could be present in both groups. So comparing the pattern of result here with the one that I show in previous, the graph in the previous slide, uh, it says that the effect exists above and beyond prejudice. Otherwise, we should observe the same pattern of results uh, also here. From this, we can conclude that consumers react negatively to gender ambiguous voices, and also the effect is best explained by low familiarity with voices that sound ambiguous. And also, we found that it happens above and beyond prejudice. And so, the good news is that increasing exposure to gender ambiguous voices is a viable means of reducing the negative response. That's it. Thanks for listening to this project.